So, for those of you who've just joined us, and for those who are in the process of still signing on, which I think we're doing okay at the moment, this is Marty Greif. I'm president of Site Tuners, and like I mentioned, I see a ton of people that I recognize from our discussion. I'd like to share why we're doing this webinar today. SiteSpect is a partner of ours, and we've used them on with a number of clients, and we've gotten some outstanding results. And they have some differentiators and some features that truly make them unique in the testing realm. And so we thought, let's expose our audience to basically, the goodness that is SiteSpect. And we're privileged today to have the amazing and talented Paul Terry, who is a senior optimization specialist or consultant with SiteSpect. He's been with them, I guess, about 10 years or so. And while he and I haven't worked together on a client before, people that I've worked with at SiteSpect have absolutely said good things about him. So, Paul, buddy, you there?
Marty, thanks, Marty. Really appreciate that. Hello, everyone. We're here to talk about A/B testing and how to A/B test your way to more revenue. It's not magic. It's just it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot more revenue, I guess, right? So I do work for SiteSpect. I'm a senior optimization consultant. I've been at SiteSpect about 9 years, almost 9 years. But before that, I was a client, ran a testing team for a bunch of lead gen websites here in Atlanta, where I'm located, for several years. So I've been using the tool for over a decade. Enough about me. SiteSpect is the fastest digital optimization solution on the market. It's how we're architected. We're very different. We have a patent. We're the only ones that can do this. And we have A/B testing, multivariate testing, personalization, product recommendations, all in one platform, which allows you to optimize all those aspects and then serve all those aspects the fastest way possible. So you can tell I'm not in sales. I am a consultant. I work with teams on building optimization teams, prioritizing testing, implementing tests, and analyzing tests. And so it's a lot of fun. Okay, what is A/B testing? Well, basically, I like to, when people ask me what I do for a living, I tell them that I mess with people's experience on the web. We do behavioral testing, right? It's kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? What's the best lifeline? Well, it's poll the audience, right? They're right almost every time. Your audience, your user base is right on every time. If you want to make an improvement to your site, you're asking the audience, well, what happens if we do this, right? So whether it's on a website or an application on a phone or a tablet or whatever, you are basically, you have a control and you have one or more changes, variations that you're going to make. And then you're going to watch that user journey, right? You're going to watch that user journey and you're going to decide how you change the user journey. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about putting together roadmaps, how to measure success, right? What does success look like? And what about failure? What does that look like? And bring it all together with revenue, because that's kind of what it's all about. Whether revenue for you is dollars or leads or loyalty or maybe it's revenue, maybe it's profit. There's a lot of drivers here, right? You can drive anything that you want. In another life, before I got into A/B testing, I was a software engineer for several years, and I started out. One of my first jobs in software engineering was for AC Nielsen, the marketing research firm, and we helped companies lay out grocery stores. And so it was the same kind of thing. On the web today, these are our stores. they run our business, especially these days. For the past several months, they've taken on even stronger meaning. So, there's a science to this. There's a science to understanding really the user journey, what the drivers are, what the roadblocks are, how we can push through and make a better experience. It's all about understanding. We understand our business, or we should. We think we understand our customers, our prospective customers, our users. And we think we know our website. But in fact, we really don't know all three of those as well as we should. And what testing allows you to do is change something and learn. It's either going to be a success or maybe you've got more to learn. Okay. So what is testing, right? We talked about that a little bit. You're going to change something. It's going to be something very small, or maybe it's going to be something a little bit bigger, or maybe it's going to be something really massive. Maybe you're trying a new call to action, right? Maybe you're trying a new image. Maybe you're going to rearrange the page a little bit. Maybe you're going to try a different landing page that you are purchasing keywords for. Maybe you're going to try an entirely new checkout system, right? Could be big. Maybe you have a release. Maybe you have an entire release that you've been working on for weeks, or maybe in a whole quarter or a half a year. Or maybe it's a whole new website. You're just going to turn that on, roll the dice and risk your business? Probably not. You may have, QA'd the software, but have you QA'd the business metrics, right? So maybe it's a release, and maybe you're rolling out slowly your site release. Maybe you have several different, ideas for how you want to promote product recommendations. There's several different algorithms that we use to do that. Some of them are more effective on different types of sites or in different locations on your site. Maybe you're going to A/B test those algorithms. Maybe you're going to fine-tune those algorithms or the presentation of those recommendations. So, we're basically changing something and then watching extremely closely to that user journey and how it changes, right? We might be, we might be taking a change to our search algorithm. We may bring up new products on our search, maybe in a different order. Maybe we're going to promote some different products. Maybe we're trying to get more relevance. And maybe we're making the search easier to use, and so people do use it, and that's great. But is it good for the bottom line? Maybe. Let's make sure we measure all aspects of the journey. Maybe the browse path is better for some clients, or maybe our search, we've made it more prominent, more people use it. That's great, but is that a good thing? Let me make sure that it's a good thing, right? So before we start, we got to figure out, what are we going to test? What are we going to do? So, we're going to conduct a site audit. And you do this all the time, by the way. Whenever you're on the web, you're looking for a product. Maybe you're looking for that new grill or that fire pit, which I bought a fire pit cover the other day. You're shopping, and you get frustrated all the time by the websites that you visit. Not your own, of course. It's great. You don't look at your website the way that normal users do. But this audit, very often a good thing to have somebody outside your company do, or help you with anyway, because you don't see the site the way that your users do. What a site audit needs to do is to look at your site with very critical eyes as a user would, right? What are the natural order? Now, if you do traditional user testing, it is a fantastic marriage to A/B testing, because you are allowing real people to really use the site to try to accomplish goals, and you can watch them, and it'll bring up a lot of ideas. So that's one form of site audit. But you want to come away with thoughts for improvement, and I'm sure you don't have a problem with that. One of the things that testing is getting rid of the hippo in your company, and that hippo is your boss or your boss's boss, or maybe someone in the C-suite. They're the highest paid person in the company, and they want that button to be red. Well, let's make that button red. I have actually experienced that as an A/B testing manager. That we actually had to convince the president of a division to test a different button color. This is years ago, but this is what we're trying to get rid of, is the highest paid person's opinion. We want all the opinions to come forth. Whether it's your merchandisers, your marketers, your website developers, your QA team, you have a lot of different ideas. So we want to look at different elements of those ideas. How many people would this affect? Is this something that's every user would see, or only users that get so far in the funnel, only certain users that come in from a channel? What's the scope, right? What's the expected impact on the business metrics? Is it going to increase conversion? Is it going to increase average order value? Is it going to increase profitability? Is it going to give us more leads? Is it going to give us more leads to the companies that we want? All kinds of different considerations there. You have to, we try to put a numerical analysis to this to give you a scoring system to allow you to have a discussion amongst the stakeholders as to the priority and the importance of running a test. And then the level of effort. How easy is the test going to be? Is it going to be more difficult? Is it going to be easier? SiteSpect, for example, allows you to test anything. SiteSpect operates off of the basic fundamental data and processing elements in the internet. So you can, just change an image to another image. You can simply say on these pages, change this call to action to that call to action, or let's rearrange it, or let's have our back end search algorithm use a different algorithm kind of thing, right? So there's all kinds of level of effort discussion that you want to have, and make sure that you understand you're getting the biggest bang for the buck. We always want to be able to run multiple tests at the same time. We have all these stakeholders with all of these really important directions that they want to explore, and so we want to be able to have multiple swim lanes and to keep those stakeholders engaged in the process of testing, so that we make sure that all the best ideas in the company come forward in all the different areas, right? We're looking for lift, and we're looking to mitigate risk. The biggest impact, the biggest problem, with change in a business is in a website like this is when you're actually making real changes on the site, that you can't just test with a QA team, right? Because you're testing ideas, and you're testing thousands or millions of people's reaction to those ideas. The biggest problem is risk, right? I mean, you've got some new, or maybe not new, but you've got someone that's a web designer that has a better idea. Well, is that idea gonna see the light of day? Well, you really hope that it's tested. You don't necessarily want to just flip that switch on that designer's idea and say, hey, we really like this designer. Joe's just fantastic. Comes with a great pedigree. He really understands the web business and how to convince people to do something. You're not just going to turn that on. You're going to test it, right? But you're going to test it. You want to make sure the best ideas come through. So you want to figure out, what's the importance, and hopefully you have a few swim lanes to do multiple tests at the same time. We have clients that do, 2 or 3 tests at the same time. We have clients that do 20 or 30 tests at a time, complete hundreds of tests a year, right? All depends on how much traffic you have and the resources you can put toward your testing team. So you're going to have a list. You're going to prioritize it. And before we get here, we're going to talk hypothesis, right? So each test, you're going to have, what do we expect? What do we think is going to happen? This is back to your old high school science class, right? You want to say ahead of time what you're going to do and what's going to happen. You're setting expectations. And you're going to document this stuff. You're going to document what you're going to run, the control, the variation, what you expect to happen, and what you want to learn. And in order to know what you're going to learn, you have to understand how to measure. You're going to measure. And what we like to do, and this is kind of, again, a competitive thing with SiteSpect, is the way we work. Metrics are basically free. You don't have to have a lot of transaction going back and forth to measure something. You don't necessarily have to have calls going out to measure everything that happens on your website. A lot of times, the more you measure, the more overhead there is, and the more overhead there is, the slower the variation or the testing is going to be, and the slower it is, the less relevant it is, because you've slowed down your site. Of course, that's a dirty experiment. But with SiteSpect, we really encourage broad measurement. You want to measure the entire journey to your website. Okay, you want to be able to understand what happened, and very often, what actually happens isn't what you expected to happen. Maybe it is. Maybe you expected more people to click on that new add to cart because of the way you read the page, the way your call to action, the way you read the flow, whatever. And if so, you get that, and your conversion goes up, and you have statistical significance and all that's great. Go, hey, fantastic. But very often, it's the wow, well, we didn't quite expect that. Wow, look what happened. Yeah, we got more people there, but they didn't do what we wanted them to do, or they didn't go to that next step, right? So you learn stuff. In order to learn mediocrity, or learn in a test that didn't go the way you wanted, you need to measure a lot. You need to measure a lot, even on a success, to make sure that it makes sense, right? You want to make sure you didn't have some kind of a measurement error because one thing looks great, but look at this other stuff over here, right? So anyway, broad measurement, right? Every single major step that happens from landing page to thank you page, right? And then, once you get those set up, those metrics work for every test, almost every test. They're there by default. They just work. And again, they're free. There's no processing overhead with measuring stuff, the way SiteSpect works. So, you can measure up to 100 things on every test. And then every test, you may have a few things that you want to, special for this test, right? One of the things that the metrics thing is really important is if you are, you're testing new content on your site, and you're sure this is great content, and it's content below the fold, you want to make sure you measure how many people get down there. You want to look at the people who saw the change, right? And if you just, if you're looking at everybody, and you're not focusing on the people that saw the change, that scrolled down to that content, there's a lot of noise in your data. So you're not going to learn as much, and you're not going to learn as much as fast. And a lot of times, we want to measure just the pages that people land on. We also want to measure the mouse movements. We want to measure the timing sometimes. We want to measure the scrolling. We want to measure what they looked at, what they clicked on. Not every time, but a lot of times it's really important to these minute actions to incorporate them in your analytics. So we know what we're going to do. We know what we think is going to happen, and we've got a test bench set up with measurements to prove it, or disprove it, or explain in the terms of our hypothesis what actually happened, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen. If we did, we wouldn't have to test, and we wouldn't be having this webinar. All right. So the other thing is, who are we testing? This is critically important. I talked about who saw the change, but because we're going to be running potentially a lot of tests at the same time, we want to make sure that we narrow down the people that we let into the test, the people we actually want to test. So you can, we call them audiences, and these are the people that we want in our test or don't want in our test. So you're gonna say, well, we want to test people with on say desktops, but no mobile devices for this one, or maybe just mobile devices and not desktops, or maybe you want to test everybody except those people in say south of the equator, because right now the way the weather works, we're only going to test the northern hemisphere. Or maybe we can't legally test these states because of something we're offering or whatever. So anyway, there's all kinds of ways you can figure out who you're targeting with this test, or maybe you could just test everybody. Then you have to have an estimation for about how long it's going to take to get your answers. And this is it's a factor of how many data samples you have and the eventual change that you're going to see. So how much traffic do you have? How much traffic do you have to this part of the site? What do you expect the change to be? We're going to lift conversion by 0.5%, 2%, 10%. Are we going to click through is going to go by so much? Anyway, you calculate that and you have a good idea. What's really a super good idea is to explain to the stakeholders that you're running tests for the nature that time takes in this process, the nature that data sampling lends to this process. And that the fact is, because they're going to want to know, hey, how's that test going? Do you have your answer? They're going to probably ask you 2 days later. And you have to be able to educate stakeholders on the nature of time and how that plays and when you're going to know and why you don't know yet. Okay, so I'm presaging a little bit with analytics, but you want to have these frameworks worked out, right? We have our hypothesis, we have our metrics, we know who we're going to test. We kind of have an idea about maybe how long it's going to take. A good rule of thumb is at least 2 business cycles. For most e-commerce, that's 2 weeks. Your business may vary, but you want to have a good representative sample of all the different flavors of your traffic. No matter what your business is, you have strong days and you have less strong days. Well, you want several examples of both of those, right? And then it just does come down to the math, because there's a concept of statistical significance. And SiteSpect, we use a 2-tailed student t-test. You don't need to know that. It has big red and green buttons and dots and a number between 0 and 100. Anyway, but you have to know with a certain level of statistical significance that what you're seeing predicts the future. And we provide that real easy. All right. So, all right. Now we've run our test. We let it go for a couple of business cycles and got our metrics going in, and we know what's going on there. What does a successful test look like, right? Well, clearly, if your hypothesis said click-throughs are going to go up and they went up to a statistically significant amount, then that's an easy success. Congratulations. Maybe conversion went up 5%. And that's fantastic. Make sure when you interpret your results, you understand who you're testing, right? Are you testing 100% of your site and conversion went up 5%? Then that's one report. If you're only testing a certain subset of users, be careful how you report those results. I've made those mistakes. They're no fun. Okay. You prove your hypothesis. The story makes sense, right? We like to say that every user tells a story on our website, and we measure that story. And every test paints a picture. Every user tells the story of their journey through your site and how your site met both of your needs and the user's needs. And a test you run is thousands or millions of those stories together, and they paint a picture of how in general the story changes. A successful test is going to segment out smaller groups of users. You want to make sure that, because what we're judging are statistically significant lifts in averages, you want to look at subgroups. It's really important. If you, for example, you make a different call to action or whatever, and for whatever reason, it didn't work very well on a minor browser like, I don't know, Firefox or something. It could be that you need to make sure you look at that, and we have a lot of tools to help in this. We have top segments reports and so forth. But you want to make sure that a problem didn't drag your averages down. Whenever you're testing anything across devices, you always look at those devices individually. Always look at smartphones. Always look at tablets. Always look at desktops individually to make sure that what you see is representative across all these groups. So you want to make sure that you segment by groups. You want to segment by devices and by operating systems and by screen size sometimes, depending on the devices. You want to look for outliers. We have our enhanced analytics package is automatically brings in outlier analytics. So it allows you to, for example, with money, anytime you're looking at average order value, because somebody can come in and spend a normal amount, or a few people can spend a lot, and we're talking about averages again, we want to make sure there's no outliers there as well. So automating that is very helpful too. But you always want to look at outliers, and you want to segment the different groups because you're looking to make sure that things make sense, right? The story before and the story after the change makes sense, because you want to make sure there's no defects in your test, that you forgot to measure something correctly, or you didn't think about this group of users. Oh, wow. We tested this new thing, and boy, we forgot that mobile treats it very differently. So you want to look for those kinds of things to do the analysis. It's both very simple to do the analysis, to look for a simple success, but also due diligence can turn a mediocre result into either a fantastic result because you found something, or it can explain what your next step is. One of the last things I had here to say, basically, I was going to bring in now, is no test is unsuccessful, right? You're learning about your users and your company and your website and how it meets everybody's needs. And so when we do our analytics, we're trying to understand that story and how it changed. Again, you may have called more attention to your search. And that might have been great to get people to do searches, but it might not have been very good for selling products, right? Because your search results may not be great, right? We've seen that one. So, again, analytics. Make sure the stories make sense. You're looking for the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're looking for users who did what you wanted. Why did they do? When did they start doing better? How far did that success go? Did it go all the way to conversion, right? You've got basically from landing page to the next step, to the next button click. These are micro conversions along the way. We're getting the user through our site to success. Find what they're looking for, in this case of e-commerce, put it in your shopping cart and check out, right? But all these micro conversions along the way. One of them is entering your credit card information, right? There's several. And since we're measuring everything liberally, we can see where something might have gone not the way we expected, or we can see where our success started and how far it went, right? And for who it was successful. That's the good, the bad, who didn't convert, who didn't succeed. Well, why didn't they succeed compared to the control, right? It's kind of like web analytics in 3D. You've changed something, and now you're going to poke the frog under the microscope, watch him jump, and you get to see it's a live frog, so you get to see which way he jumped. Anyway, web analytics in 3D is kind of a weird thought. That's what I like to think about it, because that's what it is. You're seeing all the facets of the opportunities, the roadblocks, the incentives on your site, and you can see it happen as it moves because you've changed some stuff, right? It's really cool. Where'd you move the needle, right? No test is unsuccessful, any test, right? Okay, let's see. What else do I want to say here about this? We're going to look at some examples. Okay. Again, measuring, making sure that you're only looking at folks that saw the change. Maybe you are changing a calendar widget, but the user actually has to click on the button to see the calendar widget. Make sure you're only looking at those guys, right? Make sure you know who clicked on the button, and so you can focus in on the people that possibly saw a change. A lot of the times when I see, people that are new at testing, they don't really know how to focus on the data, right? They don't know how to tell the entire story, to tell the whole journey and see where things changed and focus on the users that were affected. Okay, so analytics is my favorite part. We do a lot of different things though. As teams, we do site reviews, we do site audits, because we've seen a lot of we do see a lot of websites, a lot of bad websites, and a lot of really successful tests too. So we get the idea, but I do love analytics. Okay, so let's see.
Hey, Paul, do you mind if I add a thought into that?
Please do.
So one of the things that we tell everybody is, you can't improve what you're not measuring. Right? I mean, it really comes down to that. So before you start testing, you need to know what your baseline is, which is why the analytics is so important. So once you know what's actually happening on your website, which is where those audits come in, right, Paul?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Once you know what you're doing, then you can create the hypothesis that says, or some number of hypotheses that say, based on what we're seeing, we think that if we make this test, it would yield X or Y. And then the other thing that I would say, because you were talking about prioritizing, when you're building out your tests, and in the hypothesis, and I don't know if you're going to talk about this, Paul, but when you're building out the test, I would strongly recommend that you try to rank your hypotheses so that let's say you've got 5 tests that you're thinking of, 10 tests. I don't care what the number is. And you say, well, if we do this test, then I'll use an e-commerce example, and we can improve the abandonment rate in the shopping cart by X percentage, this will increase our revenue by Y. Versus if we, again, in e-commerce, if we improve the product page overall, this would increase it by X. Well, then it just becomes a simple math problem. And it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong in your hypotheses, because over time, you'll get better and better at these. But if you at least know that this one test has an opportunity to yield X amount of dollars, and the second test only does Y amount of dollars, then you know which test to prioritize. Just my 2 cents on this.
Absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree with that. And you're going to find that you have stakeholders with competing motivations. If you're a medium to large company, and my best advice is to please all of them and have multiple swim lanes for testing, right? Because the people that are in charge of the numbers, it's all about revenue. But is it this revenue or is it that revenue, right? It's not always about revenue. Sometimes it's loyalty, all right? Sometimes it's particular product lines that you want to push. But you're absolutely right. Having that scorecard, understanding the bang for the buck is super important, whether you have 1 swim lane or 8, right? Absolutely. Another thought that I didn't interject that I want to is I always want to see at least 2 variations per idea. If not, 3, depends on how much traffic you have. Variations on the theme of change. You have a theme that you want to change. Explore the thought of that change in, sometimes you have, well, I can't decide whether I want to change it to this or this would be better or that would be better. I will absolutely do both, right? You'll learn so much more if you have multiple variations that you're running. Okay. So how will this increase my revenue? So many ways. So again, the thing that I just can't point out enough here is that we don't know our sites that we work with every day like our users do. We don't know it. We don't use it that way, where we know too much. And there's all different types of users, right? There's coming in from different channels. They have different experience. I'll just give everybody a free test idea right now. If you have a PDP that is rich data, make sure that you have a navigation bar that's always on the page. Probably starts out at the bottom, scrolls as you scroll down, it goes up to the top. It always has all links to all that rich information below the fold. So many, I mean, again, this is back to the idea that everybody knows to scroll. They have a mouse in their hands. They know to scroll. No, they don't necessarily know how to scroll. They don't know to scroll. They don't know the rich content below the fold. You should have important calls to action. Give the user what they want right at the top. Don't hide it below the fold. But make sure that they know what's there from the get-go. Make sure it's always visible, no matter the screen resolution, and bring them down there. We've discovered certain ways to do this, and we've run it with several clients with success every single time if they don't already have this. Okay, so revenue, you're going to increase conversion, and you're going to sometimes you're going to be able to increase average order value, depending on the types of things you're pushing. If you're pushing experiences that help people buy more, then you're going to perhaps increase your average order value, or the types of products that you're pushing. Just success itself, conversion, is going to increase revenue. We have, there's different types of promotions that you're going to measure, and some of them encourage people to buy add-on products, whether it's a recommendation product that's going to increase average order value, and potentially conversion itself. Both of those matter. If you have a good experience with a website, you're going to buy something, that's great. But what also are you going to do? You're going to come back again, right? You're going to come back and buy your next product and your next product. So there's two split things to say about it. One's kind of good and one's kind of daunting, I'll be honest. The good one is loyalty. You are increasing loyalty to your brand, your store, your whatever it is that you want to accomplish. Users find that they're successful with you. They're going to come back again. You're going to increase revenue that way, because you're helping solve a problem. You're helping them find what they're looking for, whether it's a grill or an apartment or an insurance policy. They're going to come back again to you. And so, revenue per visit, I don't love that metric. I think it's more of an artifact. But revenue per customer per quarter is definitely one that we're all going to experience when we experience success, right? Okay, so the other one that I said was kind of daunting is every success you have in testing makes the next success a little bit harder potentially, right? Because you lift conversion by 1%. Well, that next percent is just a little bit harder because you've already lifted it 1%. That's true, but it's not as true as it sounds, because there's usually a lot of opportunities to improve your site. Okay, we want to look at some just quick examples here of things that we have found with test results. Just these are really simple, but these are real. So we have a U.S. based clothing retailer, and they wanted to boost add to cart by removing the quantity selector. And I think well, you've seen a lot of websites. We've seen a lot of websites. You have too. Not every interface is always great. Here's another hot tip. If you have software engineers designing your web interface, find somebody else to do it. I'm a long-term software engineer, and I love to design interfaces. And back when I was a software engineer, before I'd studied this for a decade, I did a lot more than I should have. So they got rid of this quantity selector, and because I think most people, when they buy an outfit, they buy one of them. In this case, so it was problematic. They ran it for 2 weeks, and they boosted add to cart 2.57%, boosted checkout 2.74%, revenue per visit 2.11%. Again, don't love that metric, but they did. This 2-week, just running the test, they made almost $100,000 in revenue increase. Not to mention the every 2 weeks beyond that, right? So again, I can't stress enough, you are very proud of your website. I'm sure it's wonderful. It pays your bills. It's a big part of the success of the company, but little things like this can make a huge difference, okay? All right, motorcycle gear retailer, US based. They added thumbnail images to the PDP for mobile. They didn't have those, or they didn't have them at all. In this particular case, this was a test that rather than just inject these images using SiteSpect, which is certainly possible on the front end, or I'm sorry, on the in the cloud in SiteSpect, they signal their web server to actually do it. This is origin experiment thing here. Tells me that it was something that they triggered their website to do a little bit differently. And they saw a 5.7% increase in the image views, 5.3% lift into unique add to carts. Those are users who didn't do an add to cart. 5.3% more of them did that. 10.2% increase in revenue. Now, everything we report here is at statistical significance. Whenever you report results out, they should be at statistical significance, and if they're not, you should specify that. And statistical significance is generally minimum threshold 90 or above. But again, little changes that you can do that you might have thought, yeah, one of these days we'd like to get around to adding thumbnail images to the PDP, but we've got other stuff to do. Well, again, it's back to that roadmap. It's back to the prioritization. Think about it. Look at some of these successes that folks have. Take a real critical out of your conversion. Making your website better is revenue generating, and you will see your return on investment in testing many, many times over. We're constantly amazed. Okay, here's another one. Changing the list view to a grid view for a particular product category. They just tested a product category to see what happened. And it was 2 weeks. This is a client side. This is a test that takes literally 30 minutes to set up, because you've already got your measurements. You insert a little JavaScript generally, and boom, it's done. They ran it for 2 weeks and made $76,000 in those 2 weeks in additional revenue. Not every other 2 weeks, added on to that too. 7% lift in conversion revenue per visit, 3.2% increase in orders. It is again, little things very often. A decision was made at some point to do the website this way, and then time moved on, and it was never tested by polling the audience. And so again, there's so many ways to boost your revenue, to boost your conversion, to boost your average order value, to boost your loyalty, to bring new clients success, and make them to be return customers to your website. That's basically all I have to this, introduction to how to increase your revenue in 45 minutes.
Well, Paul, you've got a bunch of questions here, so you don't get away that easily.
Uh-oh. Okay.
So, and some of them, there's a couple of really interesting. There's one that I'd like to address here is, with all the testings that's being done or being conducted, right? Having them be able to uncover some design principles that don't need to be tested anymore. I have an opinion on that, and I'm sure you do. So you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Oh, all right. So here I have two answers to that. There are absolutely things that we tell people you can do this because we know that it increases revenue 99.999% of the time, right? And so, for example, having a phone number in the top right-hand side of a corner on the desktop, or having your click-to-call icon absolutely does it, right? So that works. But here's the caveat. While I know that works, and there's been a number of things that I've told people, if this will work, you don't have to test it. I then tell them that they still might want to test it. And here's why, all right? if you know something's going to work and you're in an organization where you have to prove the value of the testing by testing something that works and quantifying the lift that you got and the money you made from it, it gives you the runway or the bandwidth to be able to propose other tests that you're not sure about, that you just have an hypothesis on. So yeah, there's things you can do, but if you stack the deck in your favor, oh my God, that means you can do more. That's my take, Paul.
That's a great point. No, you're absolutely right. I don't, there's definitely a lot of things that you just do. One of the ones that I know is red means stop. Red means bad. Don't have a call to action that's supposed to be encouraging you to go forward. Have it be red. I know that's everyone's like, oh, we don't need to test colors, and so that's kind of one there. But there's always, caveats, and I agree, get some successes. Once you have some successes and you boost that revenue, make sure that you communicate what you're doing, why you did it, and what the results were. And you'll have a lot more internal customers coming your way to test things. So yeah, absolutely. Take one that you know is going to work and then show it off.
Right, absolutely. And along those lines, somebody else asked a question, how do you convince the boss to basically make the test, because, the project's done, you've got a site, they're willing to allocate money for, a lot of money for redesign of a website, but not in testing. And so, again, I have opinions. Paul, I think you should go first this time if you want. Yeah.
So, a couple things to say about it. One, if you can all avoid it, don't just do things in silos and have some other company go out and just build you a whole new website. There's something called the agile approach, software development agile approach, and it's making small changes constantly. If at all possible, if you can evolve your website, we find that's a much better solution than to go invest $5 million and having your site completely redone and then test it. Major retailer, major, one of the largest websites in the world, I worked with testing their complete new checkout process that they just went off and did. And they did this in, I think it was the month of August, we were testing it. And so you can tell, October is right around the corner. It tested poorly and they went with it anyway. And it cost them several $100,000, maybe a couple $1 million. I don't know. Because they had sunk costs and they had stakeholders with their reputations on the line, right? And so if at all costs, don't do that. But on the flip side, rolling out a software release, a few percentage of traffic at a time to, make sure that the business metrics are improving or at least holding steady is absolutely worth the investment of. It's the way to roll it out. It's not like you're not rolling it out and you're testing it. You can roll out a release that way. Even if you've tested all the individual components, there's always something in there, 2 or 3 or 100 things that weren't tested. So yeah, absolutely. You've talked about me signaling the website to use a different algorithm. You can signal a different cluster to serve these sets of users. So release testing is a critical tool in the strategy of always improving.
Yeah, and I would second that. We actually had someone come to us that they had just redesigned their website. The old website performed reasonably well, but it was outdated. It was ugly, and then they created this new, responsive, beautiful website, and the conversion rate almost dropped to 0. All right, and because they had somebody, to Paul's point earlier, the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion, building the website. And at the end of the day, and this is what we tell our customers, and I've said this to CEOs, I've actually said, I really don't care what your opinion is, okay? I am a relentless advocate for your clients. If they're happy, you make money, okay?
Absolutely.
So I really don't care what you have to say. That doesn't win friends, but it does make them money, okay? And
you got to be careful how you say it. But
I did screw it up once. I did say, I had one client, a big client who was in the hardware business, and they were $20 billion a year company. And the EVP said to me, well, Apple does it that way. And I replied back to him, because he really annoyed me. Oh, you're not Apple. They're not a client anymore. So you're right. You got to be careful how you say that stuff.
Right, right.
One more question, and then I really want to talk to everybody about the benefit of SiteSpect for a minute. And I'm going to do that as opposed to you, Paul. All right, because that way it's not a commercial. It's an opinion from a third party. But here's the question that was asked. Traffic size for A/B and multivariate testing. And again, I got opinions on this too, but if you want to take a crack at it, and then I'll share my thought.
So minimum traffic levels, again, it all depends on the data samples for the metric that you want to change. It's not necessarily about traffic. And so you really can't talk about it in terms of traffic. We have very small websites. We have very large websites, obviously. But it's all about the data samples. So everything you measure, so you want to make a change, right? You're gonna measure something, and you're gonna want to know whether or not you've got a difference that really is more than just flipping a coin 3 times and getting heads, right? Statistical significance. Everything you measure, every value of every measurement has its own data and its own statistical significance calculation, and so that's one thing to say. So it's not necessarily traffic, it's what you want to measure and how often it happens. And another really good one is, we had a small website that we were working with. And in order to, another thing is, if the larger the reality of what the lift is, requires less and less traffic to validate its statistical significance. So if you have not been testing, if you don't have an optimized website, you're going to have a lot more low-hanging fruit, and thus the traffic that required at the beginning is going to be a lot less, right? So it's a good problem to have, because that way you're going to get a better website anyway, and hopefully more traffic as a result of that. But it's also about, it's not just about that final number, did we get the lead? Did we get the sale? It's about those micro conversions. So every move that a user takes, whether did they do a search, did they browse a category, did they look at a product detail, did they scroll down to the bottom, did they look at the call to action, did they click on this call to action, did they click on this hero, all the micro conversions that all the way get down. Generally, on most websites, the hardest thing, or the thing that, not the hardest to measure, but the thing that requires the most data, is the ultimate conversion, because it's the end of your funnel by definition. But you can get there through micro conversion measuring, and those happen a lot faster. So I encourage you, no matter what the traffic is on your website, if you've got a few hundred users that are regularly on there, there's no issue with having success.
So Paul, let me add to that just to make it clear. So micro conversions, what Paul's talking about, is basically an action that gets them further down the funnel. So they're on page A and they get to page B, and you're measuring the increase of people moving from page A to page B, but that may not be the subscription or the sale. That's a macro conversion where you're actually getting that final sign up or whatever the final thing is.
Exactly.
So with that in mind, okay, here's the numbers. So it's been our experience that and it's not about traffic, it's about conversion events. So if we say a sale is a macro conversion event, to do an A/B test, you need to have a minimum of 10 conversion actions per day, per device type, and preferably per channel, okay? Versus, so that would be your PPC traffic versus your SEO traffic. And if you have a minimum of 10 conversion actions a day per device type, and again, preferably by channel, then an A/B test would take on average about 30 days. The problem is you can't hold me to that. That's an average across a lot of different tests we see. To Paul's point is, if you knock it out of the park with a lift, it'll actually get to statistical significance faster. If you've got a test that frankly doesn't have anything, it'll take a lot longer. And so, and every additional variation you have, requires an additional 10 conversion actions, but that's the bare minimum. I'm much happier with 50 conversion actions a day, right? So it's in that range. So hopefully that helps a little bit. So
Yeah.
let me just say this, guys. If you haven't looked at SiteSpect, I would encourage you to do so, because their architecture is completely different. Being that they've got a very different kind of server architecture, it eliminates a couple of problems that most people have with testing. One of the problems that eliminates is the flicker, which he didn't talk about, but one of the things that really ruins testing a lot of times is that flicker, and they eliminate that flicker, which I can't even begin to stress how important that is. And the second thing, because of their truly unique architecture, it absolutely helps you deploy tests a lot faster, because it eliminates some of the bottlenecks in your development cycles. So, and here's what I'm going to say. If it takes you a time to develop stuff and roll out tests, and or if you're having problems with the flicker, or if you're just getting new to this testing or whatever, Paul put up an email up there. I would encourage you guys to reach out to SiteSpect to see how they can help you. So that is my endorsement, for lack of a better term, for SiteSpect. We've worked with them on a number of occasions, and they have been an outstanding, and I do mean outstanding, partner. So, Paul, I don't know if you want to say anything after that, or if I just kind of stole the show for you.
So I make it a little personal here. I was a software engineer for 30 years, software engineering management. And I got really tired of the bits and the bytes and all the discussions on tools and whatnot. I wanted to build better websites. And once I got into this testing, about 10 years ago, 12 years ago with SiteSpect, as a client, it's just so much fun. It's so much fun to make the best ideas come forward and to make a better website. It's a win-win. It's a win for your users, because they're accomplishing what they want to accomplish, and it's a win for your company because you're helping those users find what they're looking for. So it's just, bottom line is, it's a lot of fun, and you get to work with. I work with about 15 clients all around the country. Some of them are insurance, some of them are retail, some of them are selling all different kinds of things. Some of them are lead gen. But I work with their different teams, work with their marketers, work with their product folks, work with their designers, and just unlocking the best ideas that they have and that we can bring them is just a lot of fun and very, very rewarding for everybody involved. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
And let me thank all our participants today. Let me thank SiteSpect and Paul specifically for addressing our audience. And if SiteSpect or if SiteTuners can be of service, please reach out to them, or you're all part of our audience, feel free to reach out to us. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Bye, everyone.